Recently, as a church, we've been studying contentment, and Pastor Scott had used bucket lists and waiting rooms as metaphors to sort of help us understand. I would like to share my waiting room story, so to speak. Jesus and I have been on this road to contentment together. My road's kind of paved with cobblestones. I'm learning still to be content, and as my lovely wife would tell you, I am a slow learner. Jesus' life was almost one long waiting room, if you think about it. He had a bucket list of sorts. As an adolescent, he wanted to preach in church, and so he did, and sort of made his mom mad when he didn't show up on time for something else. Later, he pleased his mom by being a bartender at a local wedding. Then he went on to calm lots of storms and walk on water. So you could say, check, check, check. He's accomplishing many, many things. He at one point wanted to preach to thousands, so he did that, and then turned around and became a caterer to thousands. Check, check. He went into a kind of a really bad waiting room. If you'll think about the Garden of Gethsemane and what he had to go through in that waiting room, Scripture talks about him being despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Doesn't sound like a very good waiting room if you think of it that way. Being tortured and killed on the cross, and then spending a waiting room for 2 days in a grave. All of those, you could say, were part of his bucket list. Then, rising from death on the third day was one big check-off item. I can only imagine the people that saw him come back to life, knowing he had been dead, probably had the pickle juice scared out of them for a bit. My story starts by saying a year ago I was told I have a year and a half to live. And we'll get into that later, but that creates a waiting room all of its own. When one has a lot of dreams, we say that our dreams are broken or crushed, and Apostle Paul had a lot of dreams, most of which he was able to accomplish, but not without hardship. I've gone through failed businesses, financial disaster, relationship turmoils, broken dreams, and pretty stinky health as of late. One of my dreams was to become a famous singer, and I did my first professional gig when I was around 15. I went into the local malt shop and offered to sing if they'd give me a free milkshake. And they did. I got my free milkshake. The funny thing, though, I was never invited back for that gig. And I think the next time I went in to buy a milkshake, they charged me double. So, like my singing career, that story is kind of a digression. I've had 2 different kinds of cancer, treatments for which injured me. I've had things removed and things repaired. I've been stoned twice, once by my kidneys and once by my gallbladder. The heart is what's giving me problems of late, and a year ago was being offloaded from an ambulance in front of a local ER. And about halfway out, we got stuck. And I thought, well, maybe they've changed their minds and they're going to take me home to die. But then I heard the attendant at the bottom of the gurney say, "It's stuck on my belt." So I thought, oh my Lord, if you take me home now on this gurney, this young lady's going to have nightmares the rest of her life. But eventually the other paramedic climbed out of the ambulance, and between the two of them, they were able to lift up the gurney, and the carriage unfolded and they wheeled me in. So after defibrillating me, and a few days later, it's when the heart people said, "You've got between 12 and 18 months to live." I've discovered that bucket lists change, and sometimes not so much because you're checking off items, as I've noted Jesus did, but because the container gets smaller. I've gone from a bucket to a sand pail, and now I'm down to a teacup. And I don't necessarily say I've checked off a lot of things, it's just things have fallen off. The container can't hold as many things anymore. When I see doctors, and this is where my waiting room gets really cool. I love this. I see going on 5 doctors pretty regularly now, most of them ologists of some sort or another. And I've noticed 2 things in common that all of these doctors have. One, they all studied in Transylvania, because they take more of my blood than I care to remember. But one of the good things that I am reminded of when they analyze my blood for a variety of reasons is every time somebody does that, I'm reminded that God the Father looks at me and sees the blood of his perfect Son. The Bible tells me that I've been washed in his blood. I've had a spiritual blood transfusion, as it were. I'm a new creation. So it's a good thing. The other thing that all these doctors have in common is that they love to be tourists. They take and save different parts of me from time to time as souvenirs, and they take lots of pictures. CT scans and x-rays and cameras up, cameras down, cameras all around, Polaroids, ultrasounds, you name it. They call it diagnostic imaging. And again, every time I go into diagnostic imaging, I'm reminded that when God the Father looks at me, he sees his Holy Son. Sorry. I call that the best witness protection plan in the universe. I have a new identity. I have new credentials. And my waiting room is pretty cool. But it doesn't end there. And finally, let me finish with this. Because of my new identity, the Bible also tells me that I am seated at the right hand of God the Father with Jesus Christ. Pretty sure that's a past tense verb used there. I call it a present reality without current experience. And I liken it to having a winning lottery ticket that I carry in my wallet. I don't really experience the results until I cash in. But this is a waiting room for Jesus. It's a beautiful waiting room. And I call it a waiting room because there's one more item on his bucket list. He's waiting for God the Father to say, "Let's go." And he's going to return to earth and rule forever. And since I'm his traveling companion, I get to come and watch. I'm pretty sure that there's going to be lots of people that are going to have the pickle juice scared right out of them, because the Bible says that every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So at that time, it'll be check, 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 quadruple check. Bucket list complete. Waiting rooms are over. And those of us with new identities will be content. If I address my grandchildren with this video, I would encourage them to make sure their identity is secure.